I known about house hacking and real estate back when I bought my first house in my early 20s, then yeah, I would have definitely done a house hack instead, but we didn't know any better. It's the best way to get started with as little money as possible. Start building up wealth and essentially save your expenses. You would have paid to live somewhere anyway, paying rent or a mortgage. That gets paid for you. So you can save that, what you would have expended, count that as more or less income and save up more to keep buying more properties.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Journey to Multifamily Millions. I'm your host, founder, and CEO of ZANA Investments, Tim Little. And on today's show, we have with us Don Spafford. Don is a partner at Happy Camper Capital, a private equity firm and operations hub for outdoor hospitality properties. He bought his first property, a four-plex, in 2017. Then he began to scale into commercial real estate, including ground-up development projects, and joined Happy Camper Capital in 2021, where his team focuses on syndicating RV resorts. Don, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Tim. My pleasure to be here.
Yeah, and it's great to have you. So I gave everyone a very high-level overview of your background, but on this show, we really like to get into details of how you got started on your journey. So please take us back to the beginning and tell us how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Yeah, I can tell you this for sure. It was not a planned journey. I didn't sit up from the beginning and say, I want to one day invest in campgrounds. But what first of all led me to investing in real estate to begin with was just I needed to create other sources of income. I knew I could not continue to work more hours or get another job. My family was growing or expenses were going up. We could not sustain the way we were going based off my income that I was making for my W-2 job. And there weren't much options for me to go out and try to find a better job either. So it was either trying to just deal with it and let our debts grow out of control, or find a way to create additional income that could help us see our current and future needs. And not just on my personal family, but I had my mother was progressively getting worse with the MS that she had. And one day she was going to need additional medical care and attention. I needed a way to help her pay for those needs as well. All these kind of things were weighing on me and trying to find a way to create more income. And so ultimately, it led me to real estate, as I saw was pretty much the only option where I could create additional income streams without putting in a lot more hours. And I didn't have the ability or resources, we'll say, to maybe create a business, or didn't have any great idea for that. So this was the only option I had available for me. And the way I had to get started was I had to get creative. I did not have a lot of savings, pretty much none. I did have a lot of debt already. And so I had to get creative with the way to make it happen. So I knew, again, this was the only option I had, really. So I discovered two things: a local bank that would do a 10% down payment on investment properties, which is a huge help compared to 20-25%, was most were wanting. And then I also found out that I could borrow or take a loan from my 401k. So I did that. I took a loan for my 401k, used a 10% down payment to buy that fourplex back in 2017. Of course, I had analyzed many properties before that one, but this one looked to be a great deal that I could not pass up. And so, yeah, so that's how I got started, and it began cash flowing. I self-managed it. I still do today, actually. But yeah, that fourplex I bought back in 2017 for, I think, about $265,000 maybe. So basically I put 26,000 down, technically less because they give you a refund of the deposits, but that property is now worth probably close to 600,000 or more. I refinanced it about a year ago, pulled out over 100,000. So 4 times the amount I put down on it, pretty much. And then of course I've reinvested that money back into more deals, and that property now has infinite returns and cash flowing, still about $1,200 a month, even after that refinance. Great property to get started with. But after that first one, I wanted to keep doing more and growing more and scaling. And my plan was to just keep buying fourplexes. But after I bought my second and third, which I bought as a package deal with, again, just my 15% down payment on 2 together as a package deal, I not intentionally, but ended up getting involved with the land flip deal and then a development project to build a small strip mall. And then I got involved with a team that does ground up, build to rent multifamily syndications. And then from there, end up with Happy Camper Capital. Again, not necessarily a straight line path or a planned course of action, but as these opportunities came before me, I saw the opportunity was there, and I decided to take action, find a way to make it happen and get involved and to do something with it. And that's kind of what led me to where I'm in today.
Yeah. And having talked to a lot of folks who've gone on a journey like yours, very rarely do I ever see it as a straight line that they mapped out and that's exactly, they got to where they planned. There's a lot of twists and turns and branches along that journey. So the one thing that you talked about was creating those additional streams of income. And I think that's a place where a lot of people are coming from because they have their W-2 jobs and sure, it pays the bills and maybe they're doing okay, but they know they're not going to be able to invest and build wealth the way they want to with that income. The options like you laid out are get a better job that pays incrementally more or get another job where you're trading time for money, but there's only so many hours in a day. So I think that's a really important point that you had to look outside of what, most people get stuck thinking about, which is just their job and looking for how you could possibly build that additional income stream. And you did it the same way a lot of people first discover, which is investment properties with small multifamily. So applaud you for that because that's exactly how I started as well with a duplex. I do want to ask you, how did you get a bank to give you a loan with only 10% down for that investment property? Because that was a rude awakening for me when I first went to go invest. And I was like, all right, I had done like 5% and 3.5% for my houses using FHA and VA loans and stuff like that. And then they're like, yeah, it's 25% down and I was like, well, excuse me. So I'm really curious how you were able to do that.
Yeah, I had the same thoughts. Before I started investing, I, of course, read a couple books and they all were outlining that same thing that you need 25% down. For me, it was always one of those things like, I'll probably never be able to do that. It was just through some networking and open forums on some other websites where I heard about this and talked to this local bank. They cover pretty much most of the Western states region. And now actually have a list of a few other banks that do similar. But this time, this bank had a portfolio loan, basically. So you could get, I think it was up to, I think they allow you 2 loans at 10% and then 10 at 15% down. So you could get up to 12 loans with this bank with between 10 to 12, 10 to 15% down payments. And they're no PMI. Their interest rates were pretty much normal as what you expect for any other bank. So it wasn't like you're overpaying other fees to get those low down payments. It's just this option that this bank had at the time, which I think they still do today, may have modified it a little bit, but they're just, it's through a portfolio loan through that bank. And so it's one of those things that if you search hard enough, you'll come across it. If you just take no for an answer, banks say, nope, you got to give them 25%, and you're like, fine, and do it, then you're giving up too quickly. I know there are plenty of other banks out there that do similar things. So I just got to keep checking and looking. And like I said, my wife is a realtor out here as well. So we've compiled lists of banks that have low down payment options so she can send to her clients looking to buy. So here's a list of lenders, talk to them, see which ones works for you, and go from there. And for me, I was more concerned about the time that I had a lot of debt. I didn't have a lot of income to really cover that debt to income, but luckily the banks also look at the income from the property itself to more or less count towards your income to help pay for that mortgage. Luckily for me, that was enough to get approved, even with my high debt, that I was able to make that happen.
Yeah. And I think that's a key point. What you just said right there is that sometimes, and not always, but banks will take into account the projected income from those units for the income requirement for that loan. And that's what you're getting at, right? Yeah. And so that's huge because people look at these properties and see how expensive they are. And a lot of them probably just assume that they couldn't possibly afford it based on their current income, but they need to take into account that possibility may be there. But just like you, they need to do that research. They need to talk to banks because especially at the local level, banks have different policies, rules with how they'll lend and what the restrictions and stuff are on that stuff. So they're a lot more flexible than I'd say the big banks when it comes to stuff like that. Definitely worth asking the question. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, so you said you self-managed that one and you still do to this day? Okay. Hats off to you, sir. I stopped doing that after about a year because just the issues with tenants and the time that is taking away from me. There's certainly the money saved and not going through a property manager that had 10% is pretty average, but I couldn't do it. But the other point that I think you brought up was I think what most people recommend, whether you're on Bigger Pockets or anything like that, is, hey, do a live-in flip or whatever. Yeah, sorry, house hack. And that is ideal for people for whom it's ideal, right? It's not it doesn't make sense in every situation. If I could go back to my 21-year-old self or something, then yeah, I'd probably do it. Because even with a VA loan, you can get up to a quadplex using the VA loan. And so I beat myself up for having not done that. But once you have a wife or husband, whatever the case may be, a significant other, and then you have kids, then it becomes less viable, I'd say, as an option. Because we looked at it, but we're like, no, there's not like a duplex or a triplex that makes sense for our growing family. And so then we had to do the strictly investment property, which is unfortunate, but hey, you got to do with what you can in your specific situation.
Something. Yeah, and I feel the same way. Had I known about house hacking and real estate back when I bought my first house in my early 20s, then yeah, I would have definitely done a house hack instead. But we didn't know any better. And you said by the time I didn't start investing until I turned 40. This time I already had 4 kids, and yeah, doing a house hack was pretty much impossible. So we needed more space, and my wife wouldn't want to do it anyway at that point. But I definitely just suggest to everybody that has that possibility, said as they're younger, don't have kids and things just yet, or are still small children. Yeah, if you can make that work, do it. It's the best way to get started with as little money as possible. Start building up wealth and essentially save your expenses you would have paid to live somewhere anyway, paying rent or a mortgage. That gets paid for you. So you can save that what you would have expended, count that as more or less income, and save up more to keep buying more properties and keep doing that as much as possible. So I've taught my children that when they're ready to buy a house, they definitely need to look into doing that first, and I'll start them off on a better path than I had for sure.
Yeah, that's why I'm already looking at that too. My kids are pretty young. They're 4 and 7 years old, but we already started a 529 for them, and it's all things investing. It's better to get started earlier because you have to put less money in and watch it grow over time. So we're putting like $100 a month into each of their 529s. And meanwhile, I'm watching YouTube videos on tax strategies to use that money to buy a property while they're going to school and how I can do that legally. That way it's going more than just to books and tuition and stuff like that. So definitely think long-term in this game and how you can use the different tools that are out there, like a 529, for example. There's a lot of restrictions with it. I won't get into that rabbit hole, but so you started out doing small multifamily, just like I did. What made you pivot to the RV resorts?
Again, it wasn't an initial pivot, right? I did some other things first, but after I closed on the third fourplex, I realized that getting to that point where I needed to get to for that passive income goal I was trying to reach, it was still going to take a long time just buying fourplexes. During this time, after I bought that first one, during 2018, 2019, the competition was just getting worse and worse. Like anytime we'd make an offer, we'd get outbid by $100,000 at the time. So it was like to the point where this doesn't make sense. Who's paying that much money and why? I thought it was just dumb myself, but I understand people are buying for appreciation or other reasons, but my goal was cash flow. If it didn't cash flow, I wasn't going to buy it. So I started looking into what other options are out there. I even got to the point of considering maybe I'll shift back to single family. And I never was interested in single family, but maybe if people are going crazy about multifamily, I'll go back to the single family and see if that can make that work, or do a short-term rental or something. But just along that journey, as I was searching, analyzing, trying to find something else that could work and making offers on things, did discover about syndications and kind of looked into that a bit. Was not on any social media at the time. If you can believe that now, people that follow me now on LinkedIn, but I was not active on anything other than, I guess, Bigger Pockets. You can consider that maybe, but so I did not associate with or know many people that were doing syndications or any other commercial multifamily or commercial real estate at all. And so when I first heard about syndications, I thought it sounded interesting. I talked to a couple of people that I heard through a podcast, and unfortunately for me at the time, they wanted more than I could afford to put in, or I wasn't qualified as a accredited investor in some cases. They kind of left me still sitting around. That's still a future thing. Maybe didn't know how else I could get involved. And again, these other opportunities came up to do this ground up development of a commercial retail space, which intrigued me. I found a couple of JV partners to bring capital to that. And then I got pulled into that. Well, not really pulled into, but this other development team that does ground developments of, they usually build and sell townhome communities. They approached me to invest with them at one point in the past, and they came back to me again at the beginning of 2021. They had a new project to invest in. And by this point, I was now starting to get active on social media and starting to go to networking events and getting to know people. And so I mentioned to them in passing, it's like, hey, I network with other investors and syndicators and things. I could probably help bring capital to you guys' deals if you'd let me work with you. And so they luckily agreed to bring me on and work with them. And During that time, of course, I mentioned to them how my thought would be better to stop selling these things because you should build them and hold on to them, have a long-term hold, build to rent model. And after, I guess, thinking about it a bit, they agreed with me and they made that shift to build to rent. And so that's kind of what we focus on now with that. And so along the way, I was still trying to find those, get more into commercial, standard, we'll say value added multifamily, like most people are out there doing. And again, going back to my goal was always cash flow. I needed to get the cash flow. It had to be double digits or better. And I was not finding anywhere. I'd look for deals, I'd analyze them. Even as a JV type opportunity, I'd look at like 20 or 30 unit properties, and nothing was penciling out to the point that made me feel confident enough to like it. And I looked at other people's syndications, same thing. I was like, oh, I could just invest as an LP investor maybe at this point. And I was not impressed with the returns I was seeing. And so that kind of led me to keep searching, keep looking, keep my eyes open for something. I was like, there's got to be something better out there. And part of my daily habit was listening to podcasts. I worked from home at this point, so I just listened to podcasts all day long while I worked. And one of those, I heard somebody else talking about campgrounds as an investment option, which I had never heard about before. I never even thought about before. I live very close to Yellowstone Park, so it's a big camping area. And so I saw this as an opportunity. I was like, hey, maybe I could get my foot in the door here a bit, to be a boots on the ground, go take pictures or videos for somebody that wants to buy something in this area. And that was my initial thought, and my initial action was to do that. So I started networking with people that are in this space, going to webinars and other events with people that are doing that, just to get to know who's in the space and kind of put that offer out there. It's like, hey, if you want to buy here, I can help you out. And just in doing that, just basic networking, getting to know people in this space, I came across a couple of guys that had just bought their first property and were looking to expand and grow their team and to do more. And so in talking with them, we set up a call. We discussed my goals and their goals and their plans for the future, what this company was going to look like and what they're going to do. And everything just seemed to align perfectly. They met the things I was looking for, the kinds of returns I needed. It was something unique and different that I think was, for me, also essential to kind of stand out in the crowd and be different than just another, hey, I'm another multifamily guy of a sea of thousands, right? So I was like, hey, I like this a lot. So that's kind of where they actually then invited me to join with them. And that's kind of how I got involved with Happy Camper Capital, and have had a blast since I've joined them, because it's honestly, as I learned more myself about it and got involved and seeing more of the things that we do, I fell more and more in love with it. And I love talking about it and telling other people about it, because I know there's lots of people out there just like myself that are looking for higher cash flows that don't know where to find them or have not heard anything else better out there. So they just take what comes and invest in just anything just to keep their money working, but not knowing that there's opportunities to get even higher returns out there. So I enjoy talking about it and letting people know that there are other things out there.
Yeah. And I think what you ran into was the same thing that I did when I started. Like I said, I started with a duplex and I had my freedom number all calculated out. Okay, I'll need this many units, this many doors in order to, at an assumption of $200 a month per door, et cetera, et cetera. And then I was like, wait a second, I need to get a lot of units in order for that to happen. And just with the challenges associated with lending and everything else, I just didn't see it as being realistic at a certain point. And so I was like, no, this isn't going to work. And so I was like you, I was like, well, okay, what else is out there? So I started going to like multifamily conventions and stuff like that, and listening to alternative investments on a podcast. Yeah. And then this whole new world opens up to you, because there's so many different assets out there within just commercial real estate in general, from campgrounds to multifamily to you got storage, which is big right now, and then industrial. So much out there that there certainly should be something for everyone. What I wanted to hit on though is I think is a key point that you spoke about for aspiring active investors, people who want to get involved and do it, not just be passive. There's a couple of steps that you followed. First was educating yourself. I think that's key. The second is that you are networking at the same time. So you're meeting people who are already doing it in the industry, et cetera. And the third thing that is vitally important to actually getting on a deal is communicating the value that you can add. And I know a lot of people starting out, they're like, oh, I haven't done any deals. I don't have a background in this industry. So what could I possibly add? But for you, and I've done the same thing. It's as simple as location, right? That can be an asset in and of itself to say, you're over by Yellowstone, so that's perfect for that asset class they're looking at. I'm in Tampa, another like hot, like multifamily market. So we can make that argument to say, hey, if you're looking at a deal in Tampa, you need someone to do a drive by and check it out, take pictures, whatever the case may be, then you're actively providing value. So would you say that was a huge part of how you were able to get like entry into that market?
Look, that was my goal. Like you're saying, that was what I could say was my superpower. Your boots on the ground. That's not what ultimately led me to become part of Happy Camper Capital. That wasn't what was the end case benefit I could bring to the team. It was more of my background, my education, career, finance, and things, and just my, I guess, partly in general was my motivation, right? So that I was eager to be part of something and do something, and I was highly motivated, like you said, to reach that freedom number. I was willing to do just about anything, obviously legally and ethically correct, but I guess in a way, luckily for me, they saw something in me that I probably didn't even see myself. I was surprised when they invited me to join with them. I didn't really have a whole lot of experience per se, obviously, especially in the campground space, but it's not something that couldn't be learned, just like anything. You can obviously learn how to underwrite, you can learn how to asset manage, you can learn all these different things that can be done, but it's more of, I think, aside from having a specific skill or talent, it's in some cases just your personal personality, motivation, whatever drives you that can in itself be a benefit. We have several people on our team that, for example, that all they do is acquisitions. They're on the phones all day, calling up campgrounds, looking for ones that want to sell. They have that, I guess, unique talent to not be afraid to make phone calls and get rejections before you find a good one. So there's different things that people can offer. Like I said, it could come down to time or talent, experience, and whatnot. You might be surprised at what you may have to offer that you haven't considered. For me, what ultimately partly led me to becoming a partner. So they invited me to join Happy Camper as a partner directly. I came on as investor relations initially because I had raised some capital before and had some experience with that. But just myself wasn't, I never, I guess even from the beginning, didn't set out to say, I want to one day be one of the partners. I just was doing my job, I guess, in a sense. I'm trying to help attract capital to us. So became very active on social media, publishing posts like every day, talking about what we do, looking for investors, looking for higher returns, that kind of stuff, going on podcasts such as this one, and just talking about what we're doing just as an investor relations specialist, actually doing that additional above and beyond of what was expected of me is really what they even saw more. Wow, this guy's all in. He's willing to do all this stuff. I brought additional team members to our team, other investor relations, other acquisitions guys. So all these things that I did as just extra stuff I would have done anyway. They said, "Hey, we think you deserve to be a partner with us from everything you've been doing." And so that's how I really ended up being a partner with this team, was just giving it my all, like being all in, not just saying, "Yeah, sure, I'll help raise capital and do it half-heartedly or something." But I did everything I possibly could because I was, again, trying to prove my worth in a sense, and do everything I could to help grow the company, because I knew in the end that's what was going to help me reach, like I said, that freedom number to be able to leave my job. Which, by the way, I was able to do at the end of 2022. I did leave my W-2 job.
Awesome. Congratulations. And yeah, to your point, I think people respect that passion and that hustle, because when you're in this business, you need someone who's going to go all in and do what needs to get done, because there are a lot of people who are doing it more as a hobby than as a job. So if you show that extra effort, people are going to recognize that. So I do want to get more into the nuts and bolts of it for a bit. And so if I'm a passive investor and I'm looking at one of your deals, what are the different considerations that you need to think about when evaluating an RV resort deal versus, say, a bread and butter commercial multifamily deal?
Actually, there's some similarities in a way, but there's probably more differences, right? In a sense, a standard multifamily is fairly straightforward, right? More or less, you can rent each unit for X amount rent per month, by so many doors. You have maybe some other income from maybe a laundry or pet rent or something, but pretty much you're stuck with just your rent as your main income source. Then you have your standard expenses like your property manager and you raise some utilities or things. So that's pretty much cut and dry. A few line items and that's it. And you do your comparables to what the unit across the street is renting for and compare their, I guess, the quality and whatnot. It's fairly straightforward based on that. With campgrounds, there's a bit more to it. There can be several line items for income. You don't have just your rental. You got your nightly rentals, you got weekly rentals, you got your monthly or seasonal rentals. You've got your sales from like a convenience store, possibly. You've got your utility chargebacks. You've got possibly sales from, I don't know, a restaurant or something else on site. You've got potentially rentals for golf carts, ATVs, boat rentals, maybe different things that are drawing income streams for the properties. And then for the expenses, it's not as simple as just hiring a property manager. And that's probably what is really the biggest distinction here, why people that try to get in this space and think they can just hire a manager to take care of it, they'll fail because it is more or less a full business, right? You have a lot of staff that you need to hire to take care of all those things. They need to see to the guests' needs. These are not, so give some clarification as well. What we buy, these are not like long-term stays. These are not standard, we'll call RV park or like a mobile home park, or people live there year round. These are destination vacation campgrounds. So people come there for have fun a weekend and they go back home or something. So with that, but you need to provide that excellent guest experience to make them be satisfied and happy and leave you great reviews and want to come back, keep coming back to have fun. So there's a lot to it to need to compare and look into besides just the property itself and their potential rents. There are like all these other income streams. In most cases, the properties we buy, we're buying from mom and pop owners that probably live on site and run it, manage it themselves. So we know if we remove them, we probably hire at least 3 staff members to kind of replace what all they do. So anyway, there's a much more intensive to that on operating one of these campgrounds. But with that, there's also a lot more potential for the upside and the income. Being that if you want to look at it straight on comparing like a single family home as a short-term rental versus a long-term rental, in most cases, that short-term rental is going to do much higher income than your long-term rental. And so this business, in a sense, is along those lines. So we produce very high income on these properties. And so that's what leads to much higher returns for our investors as well. But of course, there are some things you need to consider as well. There is the location. It's not like we're in the heart of Metro City where there's thousands of people right around you, right? We're typically buying something outside of the city, maybe a couple hours away. In some cases, it may feel like in the little middle of nowhere in a sense, but at the same point, there's something about it that draws people there, right? Consider Disney World before Orlando was Orlando today, right? It was pretty much Disney World was in the middle of a swamp. And yet people would still come there because they're going there to have fun and be entertained. That's what we're doing with these properties. That people are coming there because they're going there for the vacation, for the entertainment and to have a good time. And so people are willing to drive a couple hours to go do that. And so that's what we look to buy with these properties.
Yeah. And so you mentioned it, but it does remind me of a short-term rental. It's very similar in how management intensive it is. And it does make sense now that you explain that, hey, just like with short-term rentals, obviously they can make a lot of money in shorter periods of time because they're charging by the day or week versus annually. At the same time, there's more wear and tear and turnover, obviously, but also the management piece. I guess in terms of the hold time, what is an average hold time for a deal like that for you?
So it's more as a standard hold time as you see most commercial syndications. About 5 years is what we expect. We tell our investors, of course, to expect 5 years. If we hit our return numbers sooner, we may exit sooner, but we always expect for a 5-year hold.
And is there any kind of value add component to it? I.e., are you adding amenities to these resorts, or is it just other efficiencies that you find in order to drive the value up?
Yeah, there's several things we do. Again, going back to looking at we typically buy from a mom and pop, right? So they keep it as simple as they can do to manage it themselves, right? So they don't really get the full, full potential out of the property by what they can do with their limited resources or time. And they want to keep it simple. So they typically have phone call reservations only where you have to call in and say what date you're going to come. They have the same price per night to make it simple. So you don't have to remember right, different days, different prices and stuff. Basic efficiencies like that will help improve the property alone, right? So when we purchase the property, we'll of course get great online presence, the website and online reservations with dynamic pricing. So the prices will fluctuate depending on the time of year and then the day of the week and all that kind of thing. So that alone will increase the revenue by itself. But yeah, we look for opportunities where we can, one great value add we like to do is expansion. If it's a great enough property, we want to expand it out, add on more, not just the RV pads, but also glamping options. People are looking for these exotic glamping things these days. So we add on a lot of those. So there may be cabins or other types of stays like that. But we also add on amenities, like you're saying. We want to make it to take it from a good campground to begin with to a full-on resorts, right? We want this to be the destination vacation resort. It may include, if there's not already a pool, add in a pool or possibly a lazy river or some kind of other, if there's like a lake or something on site, to bring on like an aqua park, add on boat docks and things for people to go skiing and boating, all those different things you can think of. So that there's multiple different things we can do, which is also what's great about this is you're not as limited like with an apartment building, right? You're limited on how much upside you can really get. You can only improve the apartment so much, replace the carpets and paint appliances, and you pretty much hit your maximum rent. And there's not much more you can actually do. Whereas these, you can continuously add on new things, new features, new amenities. that each by itself can bring in additional revenue. Something as simple as even installing a pizza station. People can kind of make their own pizzas, and it doesn't cost much to get the machine and the supplies. With that, can bring in. I've heard of about 50,000 more or 50,000 plus extra income per year just from this pizza machine. Right? Simple things like that. Sometimes is all it takes. But yeah, we add on more amenities, more features, things that will draw people there. In some cases, not even just for camping. We have, if you think about people who are looking to go out and have fun, right? I've did this many times myself as a youth, even with my family. Sometimes you just want to go to the lake and go hang out in the lake and go kayaking or paddleboarding or something like that. So all those options are available at these properties. So people would come there just for that, just to get away and go have fun. And they go back home that same day. They might not even stay there for any kind of camping, but they come there for other amenities, other features. We have some properties where we'll put on concerts. So people come out for a concert event. And maybe while they're there, they'll go and spend money at the convenience store, buy some snacks and drinks and whatever. Or maybe decide to stay the night and stay at the cabin or maybe a hotel if you have on site. So multiple different things that will bring people there for all these different activities and things, just above all, just to create that great experience. People looking for a good time and have fun. So that's kind of what we are providing.
Yeah, it's like you said, I guess you can get a lot more creative with ways to add value to the property. And you talked about like the lake and stuff like that. So you could conceivably do equipment rental of the kayaks and tubes, whatever it might be. That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that. And when you talked about glamping, it just made me think of like tiny homes. And so is that something you could do there? Just set up a tiny home, let a 25 to 50,000 investment to put on there. Who knows what kind of recoupment you could get from that. And I don't know what kind of permits would be required for something like that, but is that something you guys have done before?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We look at what's called standard glamping, which is more like yurts or some other type of like a covered wagon or something that is a kind of more exotic type of a stay. But then we do have tiny homes and cabins and things that we do put on the properties to bring in more. In most cases, the tiny homes we're getting are maybe a bit larger. So not the 20 or 25,000 shed, but we look for ones that can actually fit a family. So we go for the bit larger tiny homes, but they're still a tiny home. But so yeah, actually just recently we went to this campground conference this last November in Orlando. And we actually at that conference ordered four for one of our properties from some vendors who were there on at the conference event as well. So yeah, we are constantly buying and adding on features and things like that will bring people there. Again, people that may not have an RV or even a tent, like I said, they come out for some other event and decide, while we're here, let's go to stay here next day and have more fun. So they'll, if available anyway, they'll rent those tiny homes or cabins or something, which most cases they're already pre-rented way ahead of time from reservations people make months in advance. But yeah, those are all things that we add on and the returns are definitely there for them.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. So you talked about the additional staff that's required to oversee and run all these amenities. So is there third party property management, or are you just hiring those folks full time and overseeing it yourself?
We actually created our own management company. There are a few other third-party managers out there for campgrounds, not many. In fact, we were probably one of the first that kind of started doing it. And it came out a couple of years ago when we were at one of these other conference events. We're discussing our own campgrounds and what we do and how we manage them. And people were kind of asking, do you offer management for other campgrounds? And at the time we didn't, but we saw there was the need for it. We took our own resources, things that we did to manage our own, and opened it up to be able to manage third party for other campgrounds as well. So we do have that ability as well. So that's our well, I guess our sister company, Beyonder Camp, that we formed and started that manages our campgrounds at a high level. So this includes all the software, processes, systems, the online reservations, and then of course we bring in and do when we take over a new property, we'll have somebody from our company from Beyonder go there and stay on site for usually about 6 weeks to get the staff fully trained and ready to go with our standards of operations and how we want things to be done, and train them on the systems and the software that they're now using compared to what the old school was doing with the old mom and pop owners. And so, yeah, there's all that high level management. And then, of course, each campground itself has to have a general manager that's managing the site itself with then all the proper staff on hand for all the different things that need to be taken care of and managed and watched over. And of course, when we take that over and go through that initial process during those 6 weeks time period, we get to observe those that want to stay from the existing staff first of all, so assuming most of them want to stay. And then we observe and make sure they're working to our standards, of course. And sometimes we have to let people go and replace them with new hires or even a new manager for the campgrounds. We go through all those steps to hire the right people to have in place to manage it, to have people be really bought in, to want to provide that great experience for people as well, to help maintain our brand and our customer loyalty as well. So there's definitely a lot to it. Again, we have the high level and then the build level on-site management as well to cover all those things.
Yeah, and that all makes sense. I appreciate you digging into that for me. It's all of this is new for me, but I thoroughly enjoy finding out about other assets and just discovering what the pros and cons are. Because it's not to say that there's no perfect asset, right? Even within commercial multifamily, it's one has this benefit, but the other has this benefit. And so it's always interesting to go outside my own box and see what those other assets have to offer. With that being said, we do need to transition into the turbo round. So I'm going to ask you 3 questions that I ask every guest on my show in quick succession. And I just ask you for a quick, honest answer. All right. The first question is, what is one red flag that every investor should look out for? And that can be either a passive or an active investor.
We're talking in general, right? Not specifically campgrounds or just passive investors in general.
In general.
Yeah. Okay. I'd say again, it kind of goes back to somebody's goals, what they're going to need. I'd say, first of all, don't just jump on the boat because everybody else is doing it. If you see everybody you know is investing in something, that does not mean it's a great investment. So analyze yourself and see, is this going to meet your goals and help you get to where you're trying to reach? Don't just grab onto something because everybody else is doing it.
All right. Makes sense. Second question, what is a myth about this business that you would like to set straight?
Myth. For this particular campground space, people think that there's maybe a chance a recession could make it go away. People are going to stop camping or something like that. That is a huge myth. Obviously, people have been camping for, I don't know, probably 1,000 years, but these decades would say in campgrounds, right? And so there's been a consistent trend of an upward trend of camping families and people buying RVs. It's been going up steadily prior to COVID. There definitely was a slight bump in COVID as people couldn't go anywhere else anyway, so they went to campgrounds. That's definitely helped give a little bit of boost to the industry. There's also now a lot more people working from home, working remotely, that travel in an RV and live someplace new for weeks. But as far as being a problem due to high gas prices or recessions, that does not affect this industry, or at least very little. People that buy RVs, first of all, it's a luxury item, so they have disposable income, first of all, to not be as affected by a recession anyway. And the lower income people that still want to go on vacation, have a good time. They may cut back on, instead of taking their trip to Tampa, right, from say Iowa, but they'll still go to a campground that's maybe a couple hours away, a staycation, spend less and still have fun. And as far as gas prices goes, again, people are willing to drive a couple hours to go have fun. Even if you have to drive an RV that gets nearly 8 miles per gallon, most people are still willing to drive that 2 or 3 hour distance to go use it and go have fun and come back home. So it's, I'd say, relatively fairly recession resistant for an asset class.
Yeah, because like you said, everybody wants to get out at some point or another. And if you're weighing the cost of airline tickets for the entire family or jumping into the car or RV, there's definitely a lot of value in being able to drive a few hours to that location rather than hopping on a plane. All right, final question. What does success look like to you?
Yeah, for me, it comes down to time freedom. It could be not to say names, I can say like the richest people in the world, right? And have all the money to do whatever you want. But at the same time, those guys are usually not happy. At least I think. They spend their time all day doing things, and in most cases don't have a happy home life and all these things because many spend so much time on their business and everything. For me, money isn't the main thing. Obviously, you do need money to live and do things, but you don't need that abundance to the point where you can buy the world. What matters most is time. Having that time freedom to do what you want, when you want, and be with your family as much as you possibly can, because that's what really matters more than anything else in this world.
Yeah, absolutely. We hear that from so many guests on the show. All right. Hey, Don, this has been amazing. I really enjoyed, again, just learning about new assets, and I'm sure the listeners will too, because this is not one that we usually hear a lot about. Like I said, you hear about storage units, multifamily, et cetera, but campgrounds or happy camp resorts are one of those ones that's just a little more niche that we don't get as much information on. So I think that's going to provide a ton of value to the listeners. All right. So tell the audience how they can get a hold of you and if there's anything else that you have to share with them.
Sure, yeah. I'd be more than happy to talk to anybody that's interested. I highly encourage people to reach out to not just myself, but other guests that they hear that they want to learn more about. That's really what helped me in my beginning point as well. But yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there. So you can search my name, or just Google my name. You'll probably find me on lots of places, but find me on LinkedIn or go to our website, happycampercapital.com. If you go to the About Us tab there, find my name, click on that, and then you'll see a link at the bottom of the page where you can schedule a time to talk with me directly. You can set up a Zoom call and talk. So that's probably the best way to get hold of me is those two places.
All right. We'll definitely have all your information in the show notes. Again, appreciate you coming on and look forward to seeing you continue to do big things on your journey to multifamily and campground millions.